Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you guys here on this Wednesday, July 26, 2023. Well, they've went and they've done it. I'm afraid. See, all of those rate hikes, the quickest, most aggressive rate hike cycle in we've seen fast speed of it. When they hike rates up higher, the net effect doesn't occur until 6-8 months further down the line. So all those hikes that they did have a cumulative effect. The economy now is starting to go downhill. Consumers, they're tightening their wallets. They've been a lot of people have been living off their credit cards, and that's coming to a close. They've maxed out the cards. We have banks that are starting to be on the edge. What they're doing is they're doing a shuffling game with these banks. Basically here, so we have PacWest right now. This is in the Bank of California to buy. This is all BS. And this is what they've been doing lately. They either fed bailouts or buy overs. But they're trying to smooth over an enormous problem within the banking system right now. It's not just within the banking system, this problem. Studying the charts, seeing what's going on right now, what I see is we're not heading toward a soft landing. No, sorry. We're headed toward a hard landing. We're headed toward something that looks magnitudes of order stronger and greater than the great financial crisis. It's deflationary. It's going to see a lot of people lose their jobs, and then that spirals out of control. That has a knock-on effect. I don't think the Fed really, they're looking for a recession, but they've created the energy of a depression. When it hits, they're going to respond. The problem is it's going to hit the people harder than I think that they would ever know. And people are already starting to feel it. We're on the front edge of this thing. It's got a little while yet to play out. Now we got the Fed meeting. The Fed is expected to raise rates again. The banks are cutting off lending. They're getting tighter, and they're already tight, and they're going to get a lot tighter on their lending money out. The system's on the verge of bankruptcy. It's on the verge of, the whole thing is ready to roll over. And the Fed's giving that last little push and last little kick off the edge of oblivion. So, in previous shows, I've talked about something that you guys probably remember when I talked about how in the future, maybe 20 years from now or something, there's going to be dead zones, what I call wastelands or badlands. And they're going to resemble what you see when you see ghost towns. Areas that were once previously occupied, and now nobody lives there anymore. And we already see the front edge of this happen in certain places, certain neighborhoods and stuff. Places like California, Detroit, places like, like what's going on. When people things get bad enough, like the downtown core, San Francisco, and places like that. People it starts to turn into a ghost town after a while. But this is just the beginning. You see the homelessness increasing. This is just the beginning to what this enormous crisis is just ahead in our future that could move in several different directions. The war direction's probably the worst if it moves in that direction, But if it doesn't, it's still going to be bad. It's going to be bad because of the financial system and the way it's geared. It could bring on a crisis that would almost be as bad as war. And when I talk about war, I'm talking about, Third World War. So ultimately, what happens is this expanding empire expanded out during the good prosperous years. With infrastructure, they built new roads. Well, you remember during the 1970s, 1980s, all these sub roads. It used to be sub roads. It used to just be a dirt road going off to one city to another, and people would use it. But it was a dirt road. They paved them all during the 70s, 80s, 90s. When things were good, they paved and they put bridges in, and now they can't do nothing. They can't even take care of the roads they got. They can't take care of the bridges they got. Infrastructure's in decay. This includes the electrical grid infrastructure, and this is going to be the determining factor, ultimately, to these badlands that occur in the future. They're just basically mismanaged everything, and they're running out of money. And the money that they call money is not really money. They've mismanaged that, and the whole thing is just going to boil down into where they cannot maintain to where they expanded to at one time. In other words, in the whole thing is set up the monetary system is set up on a monetary Ponzi scheme that's built on the idea of growth, ever expanding growth on a finite planet. 2008, what that really was, it was the expansion reached the limit of how far the world could expand industrially, and they're cutting down rainforests. They were doing everything that they could to make money and expand. And they reached the limit, and then they had their first enormous contraction in the world. That's when it ended. That's when the old order of how things used to be and how growth was always maintained, that contraction in 2008, they fixed it by expanding the monetary supply. So the world wasn't expanding any longer. The industry had went everywhere. Factories had built everywhere. They had ravaged resources and made as much money as they possibly could. And the whole thing started to contract in 2008. And during that contraction, they made an artificial expansion of the monetary supply only, because they have total control over that. So that artificial contraction, because the Earth was contracting, the actual real physical out there, they did what the best thing they could do is expand the monetary supply. And China helped out in a big way. They built ghost cities and everything else. They expanded. They expanded in the real world, but it was all debt-based again. So this debt-based expansion of the monetary supply to the world to make it look like we were still expanding on real terms has finally hit the point where it has to contract as well. Now at this point, it's reached that inflection point, and it's on an exponential as well. And so now it wants to contract, and they're inducing it to contract by forcing austerity measures, controlling interest rates. They're inducing a contraction. But they don't realize the magnitude of the contraction that they're inducing. It's going to hit. This enormous contraction. They call it a worldwide recession. It's going to be a worldwide depression. And then they're going to try to fight their way out at the expense of the dollar, because I cannot reinforce this to you guys enough. They cannot let the whole system completely crash, because it would just crash right down to complete bottom. And it would be the end of their system. Can we say Mad Max world? They can't let us fall into a Mad Max world, because then it comes down that they're on the chopping block, and they're not going to put themselves on the chopping block. They will do whatever they have to do to keep that from happening. And if that means killing the currencies by creating too much, they will. They're going to do that. So that's what we got ahead, is this flip from austerity right now, what they're doing is austerity, to trying to fix the problem that they created and creating an ever greater problem. So what's it going to look like? What's this whole thing going to look like? Well, it's not going to be like the Great Depression of 1929 where the dollar became worth more and more and more. This is a hyperinflationary depression. So this is going to look like the dollar worth less and less and less every single day. What a mess. In further news, the Russians got control over Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Well, you've known that. The dam was blown up downstream. Now there's no water to keep the power plant cool. Well, I shouldn't say no water, but it's being reduced, the water levels. And so what the Russians did was, right now, what they just did was, it says Russian forces occupying Ukraine's Zaporizhia nuclear power plant have ordered one of the facility's 6 reactors into what's called a hot shutdown state. It says this is a move that violates safety protocols. Ukrainian nuclear operator Energy Atom has said such actions are a gross violation of the requirements of the license to operate this nuclear facility. So, this could cause a radiation leak. Could. And that would just, it's in the middle of a war zone. What would be the net knock-on effects of that? Well, do you really think NATO is going to sit back, NATO countries are going to sit back and say, oh, there's plumes of radiation floating over our heads here in whatever NATO country? Well, that's fine. You think they're going to say that's fine? No. This would escalate the war into possibly a third world war if there's a big, enormous radiation leak. There would be some sort of an escalation because they're not going to sit back and allow that to happen. They could. I don't know whether it would be enough for them to invoke Article 5 or not, but I do know it would escalate things tremendously. So, keeping our eye on that. I never expected them to do what's called a hot shutdown. Silver prices right now are up 23 cents on the day so far at $24.88. It shot up rather quickly there, and suddenly, and I'm not going to say unexpectedly. I've probably got a lot to do with the that spike is probably. I haven't heard the news yet. I'm thinking it's probably the news has probably been released on the Fed rate hike. And they get it first ahead of me, and I'll get it a couple hours later here. I'll probably get it by the time the show's over here. But it's probably as expected. It's probably 25 basis points. Take a look at gold. Gold's at $19.72. It's up $8.10. Now, cryptocurrency. We see Bitcoin is at 29,315. Yawn. I mean, it hasn't been moving much lately. Ethereum's at 1860, and XRP's at 70 cents, 70.4 cents. Dow Jones Industrial Average, 35,469. It's up 31 points on the day so far. Taking a look at crude oil, it's down 27 cents at 79.36. So it's like they moved this thing in lockstep. It's like, okay, they were holding 70 for a while. 69, 70 is staying there. All of a sudden, boom, it's moved up to 80. Now they're holding 80, 79, 79, 80, 80, 80. What's next? Then going to move it up suddenly $10 again to 90? Is that what's going on? Bonds and rates today, we're seeing fall in yields. Looking at a 30-year at 3.92. It's down 2.4 basis points. The 10 years at 3.87. It's down 3.5 basis points. And the US dollar index is at 101.13. We're not going to escape. I hate to say it, but we ain't going to escape. There's just too many things. If the war doesn't get us, the financial system's going to. And the financial system is set according to math. I mean, if you've got they used to make these things called an hourglass. I know you guys probably don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But they used to be full of sand, and they made of glass. And they still have them in the form of egg timers, like at the dollar store and stuff. You tip the thing, and the glass runs down the sand runs down the glass. And when the sand runs out, the hourglass has done its job of timing. They were old timers for timing things from times gone by. Sand running through glass takes a specific amount of time for the sand to filter through the glass. So they had an hourglass. Hourglass was a big one. It took a whole hour for the sand to run down into the bottom of the hourglass. And they were made out of glass. Probably should put a picture up to show you guys what I'm talking about, but that's what they were. Time's running out on this whole thing. Right now, there's not a whole lot going on as far as it's concerned, but the time is running out. And we're going to get hit with an enormous crisis. Probably, it very well could be the financial system that does it. And you ask, well, in what form is it going to come? It's going to come not long after the Fed finally they create the problem, and then they try to fix it with their solution. Their solution is going to be to try to re-stimulate things, get things back going again, which is just more money injection into the system at the expense of the dollar. And it's looking to me now like we're going to have a sudden hyperinflation. It's going to be rather rapid. A quick hyperinflation, not something that's slow. And that's the worst kind. That's the worst case scenario. It could lead to civil unrest and everything else on a massive scale. And of course, if we get civil unrest and stuff on a massive scale, their solution is going to be to lock everybody down like they did during COVID, probably. Except, I mean, in that kind of a situation, it would be more like a military lockdown sort of a thing, where they don't want people looting and vandalizing and things like that. I mean, let's put it this way. France was, I think, almost getting close to that point when they were having those people burning buildings down, not very long ago, just a few days ago. I think they were getting close to some sort of a lockdown situation where they would lock down the population. And basically, that kind of a thing is like a military lockdown. It reminds me more of what you would call martial law. And if it gets bad enough, the military imposes curfews. And if you're out during the curfews, you are in big trouble, because they just might take you as a looter. The military, and they are armed to the teeth. Driving around in a Humvee with a machine gun mounted on it. That's the kind of situation that can be involved. And they tell when they impose military law over a land, and they have articles within the law where they can invoke military law, and they can invoke under emergency situations and emergency declared acts and stuff like that. They can ride up and down, not like the COVID lockdown, which was a very mild form of lockdown. We're talking about a military lockdown here, where they ride up and down your road with a Humvee all night long, shining spotlight into everybody's yard and making sure they don't see anybody outside during curfew. This kind of a military lockdown. That's what we're talking about here. And if a country gets too much civil unrest and stuff, they'll call it the National Guard or whatever they have to do, tanks or whatever, and they can lock people down to the point where you can. And if everything breaks down anyway, at that point we're talking about a Mad Max kind of situation where everything just basically breaks down to the point where emergency services don't work, the power grid doesn't work. It's a total emergency, and they don't want disruption within their system. The only recourse left is pretty much a lockdown, a complete lockdown, where you don't even be able to have the privilege to step outside your door unless you got special permission. And how are you going to get that if you can't step outside your door? Well, listen, guys. Anyway, I mean, this is all just theoretical, what I'm talking about right here. I mean, they've never really locked us down like that before, except in China. I think they have a little bit during COVID. They had some pretty strict lockdowns there. But you haven't seen nothing yet compared to what they can do in emergency situations. That's why I tell people to be prepared. Put food away. Can you imagine a situation where the country were to fall into some sort of military law or whatever, and there was some sort of situation where looters or vandals and stuff were wrecking the country or whatever, so they formed a lockdown? It could be pretty damn severe. And they don't care at that point. I mean, if the country's in a total mess anyway, there's no power, no power grid's gone, the internet's gone, all telecommunications are gone, everything's disrupted, and the only thing that's running is the army. When they tell you to stay home, they don't care if you're out, they don't have any water, they don't care. You don't have any food, they don't care. You don't have anything in your house and you're desperate to get something. Well, you can't get it anyway because the power grid's down. The grocery stores don't work anymore. This is why I tell you guys, you got to have your closet prepared with some food and stuff. Because you imagine the people in China, some of them that got locked down during COVID and stuff, and they didn't have any food in the house and didn't have any water and stuff and all of that. You imagine how good they would have felt if they had a big pile of water enough to last them a half a year, and they had a whole closet full of food, and their neighbor didn't have that? How valuable that is? And how easy that is to do right now. Well, times are still not that bad compared to what things could happen. We see the threats all around us. You see it moving in this direction, towards something huge and humongously bad coming. Yet you're going to sit there and do nothing for yourself or your family? Time to start. Thank you guys for listening to my show. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Have a great day. Bye-bye.